So, Doa basically told her to toughen up or risk getting taken down. Back then, Laureate had a reality check and started plotting her escape without anyone catching on. She didn't want to end up dead or kidnapped by her family again, so she decided to pick up some self-defense skills. Whenever she had to leave, it was like she was teetering on the edge of disaster, so she couldn't spill it to anyone. She also mulled over how the world had never been kind to her, so if she wanted to stay safe, she had to be ready to throw a punch if needed. Looking back, Laureate actually felt grateful to Doha for the advice. Doha was thinking that even though he could always watch Laureate's back when things got dicey, he really didn't want her to be in those tight spots alone. He worried if his words might come off as harsh, but he genuinely didn't want anything terrible happening to Laureate. He had to be straight up because, let's face it, Laureate couldn't hide her noble status even if she wore the scruffiest clothes. Doha recognized Laureate's potential, but she lacked combat experience. So all he could do was cross his fingers and hope Laureate got where he was coming from. Then Doha was like, "Come at me one more time, but this time give it everything you've got, like you're out to take me down." But Laureate just shook her head, clearly not on board with the plan. Doa tried to persuade her by dropping the bomb that he was way stronger than she thought. He even brought up the idea that if he got hurt, he trusted she'd patch him up in a jiffy. But Laureate wasn't having it, telling him that even if she could heal him, he'd still feel the pain. In that moment, Doha got hit with this weird feeling in his chest, like something was tickling his heart. It was super uncomfortable and he couldn't even put it into words. So, Doha got himself together and told Laureate to give it a shot. He had his weapon ready now, which was this fancy folding fan. He swung it at her, trying to land a hit, but it seemed like Laureate couldn't quite dodge it, even though she made a real effort to escape. Doha then asked her if her magic was just for show, which made Laureate remember she had some magic tricks up her sleeve. She decided to try a spell that wouldn't harm Doha and shot a stream of water at him. But Doha was quick on the draw, blocked her magical water attack, and turned it right back on her, leaving her all soaked. And so, they kept at it until they were both exhausted. Back at Candle's Manor, Halstein welcomed Laureate, who had just rolled in late, and asked if anything had gone down since she was tardy. Laureate, looking like she'd been through the ringer, told Halstein she was just a bit wiped out and inquired if Azrahan had made it home yet. Halstein spilled that Azrahan was hitting up the bathroom, and he offered to give Azrahan the heads up that she was back. Laureate waved it off, saying it wasn't necessary. She thought to herself that today she needed to purify Azrahan's lower half. But then the big question hit her: how to get hands-on without it being too weird. Then, like a lightning bolt of inspiration, she dashed off, brainstorming that maybe when Azrahan was in a bathrobe, she could do the purification and touch his skin directly. Meanwhile, after wrapping up his bath, Azrahan was still rocking his bathrobe, wondering when Laureate's punishment would finally be over. But then, out of nowhere, Laureate showed up right in front of him, totally catching him off guard. Azrahan quickly tightened his bathrobe, stuttering in complete shock. Without missing a beat, Laureate stepped in closer, and Azrahan's face turned as red as a tomato. He blurted out that she was way too close for comfort, but Laureate, without saying a word, shoved Azrahan onto the bed. She then moved even closer, asking if they could get started with the whole lower body purification thing right now. Without waiting for Azrahan to respond, she went right for his leg, saying she'd begin around the knee and thigh area. Azrahan couldn't help but squirm, trying to dodge Laureate's touch. He distanced himself from Laureate and protested that this couldn't be happening. Absolutely not. But Laureate just calmly asked him if he thought it was weird instead. Then, she said it was necessary and told Azrahan to think it through. So, Laureate kicked off the purification process, and man, that curse seemed really awful. Luckily, those lessons from Doa came in clutch, making her magic way more effective. After wrapping up the purification, Laureate beamed at Azrahan, announcing that it was a done deal. But out of the blue, she got quite a shock when she noticed Azrahan was just there, not saying a word, looking like he was about to burst. Well, Laureate, you might have just awakened the beast, I guess. Now that things were getting a bit weird, Azrahan took the opportunity to move closer to Laureate. But Laureate quickly turned her head and said, "No kissing allowed." He reached out and gently pulled Laureate's face toward him, paying no mind to what she had said earlier. Azrahan leaned in and kissed Laureate on the lips. All of a sudden, Azrahan swiftly laid Laureate down on the bed. Azrahan slowly pressed his body against Laureate, while kissing her gently. Laureate couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. Still holding her down, Azrahan gazed deeply into Laureate's eyes, recalling her earlier statement about kissing needing determination. He emphasized that it wouldn't be an issue if he was fully prepared. In this moment, Laureate stopped dodging and welcomed every kiss Azrahan planted on her. The thought crossed her mind that this would be their first night together. Out of the blue, she reached out and put her hand around Azrahan's neck, signaling that she was ready to take the next step in their relationship. Azrahan was taken aback at first, but then felt relieved, knowing that Laureate felt the same way he did. Seeing Laureate looking all seductive on the bed, Azrahan couldn't help but compliment her beauty as he casually loosened his bathrobe. But then, the nagging thought of his uncured curse crept in, and he started worrying whether Laureate would be put off by his condition. He began to contemplate putting a stop to things until his purification was complete. But Laureate could sense the worry on Azrahan's face. She reached out and gently touched his face, running her hands over it, reassuring him that he was incredibly handsome, and there wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't beautiful. Then she sealed her words with a tender kiss on his lips. This made Azrahan believe that if Laureate said it, it must be true, and he no longer saw his cursed body as something repulsive. As he held her close, he silently declared in his mind that Laureate was his savior and his everything. At that moment, he started to feel like Laureate belonged to him alone. Out of the blue, Laureate laid back on the bed and pulled Azrahan closer to her, catching him by surprise. She encouraged him to proceed and do as he pleased. And that's when the special moment of their night together finally unfolded, after all the twists and turns they'd been through. The following morning, the sound of chirping birds roused them from their slumber. However, Laureate appeared completely drained after her steamy night with Azrahan, and she couldn't resist letting out a few choice words about him. On the other hand, Azrahan was feeling completely refreshed with a radiant expression on his face, and he playfully asked Laureate if she was feeling worn out. No longer feeling bashful, Azrahan just came out and asked Laureate if they could go for another round. But Laureate couldn't hold back and shouted at the top of her lungs that she might just die and labeling Azrahan a pervert. This time, Azrahan didn't throw in the towel. He pleaded just one more time with Laureate. Laureate, who had a soft spot for handsome faces, couldn't resist falling for it once more. She then pulled Azrahan closer and struck a deal that it would be just this one last time. And so, they relived that night once more. During tea time at Count Osman's manor, Erzi, looking stunning as ever, was already there and warmly greeted Laureate as she arrived. Laureate bowed and expressed her gratitude for Erzi's tea party invitation. Erzi, noticing Laureate's formality, kindly reminded her to speak casually, to which Laureate hesitantly agreed. Erzi then gently patted Laureate's head and complimented her for being a good girl, her beauty leaving Laureate quite smitten. As they strolled together, Erzi mentioned that her friends liked to hang out there and that she wanted to introduce them to Laureate. Erzi assured Laureate that her friends were all kind and hoped they would like her and not be bothered by her joining the tea party. Erzi, being sweet, stated that nobody would dislike Laureate because she was such a charming lady. So they made their way to the garden, where the ladies were already waiting. These ladies included Genevieve Charbet, or Madame Charbet, Juana Osman, Count Osman's eldest daughter, and Soraya Merchant, the lady who appeared innocent but probably wasn't. Laureate and Erzi took their seats and began chatting with the ladies. During the introductions, Soraya suddenly looked puzzled and asked Laureate if she had no last name, implying that she must be a commoner. She wondered how Laureate had managed to become close to Erzi. This question naturally left everyone in an awkward situation, except for Soraya, of course. Juana Osman and Erzi wasted no time in responding, telling Soraya to mind her manners and that her question was quite rude. Soraya, with her innocent expression, claimed she was relatively new to the social scene and apologized for her impolite question. Laureate tried to be understanding and assured Soraya that it was okay, wondering if Soraya didn't mean any harm by it. They continued their conversation and tea time together, sharing stories and laughter. As it was time to bid farewell, Juana approached Laureate and whispered that she didn't like talking behind someone's back. But she felt the need to inform Laureate that Soraya had only joined their group a few weeks ago. She explained that Erzi had taken pity on Soraya because she seemed to be in trouble during her debut, so Erzi had brought her into their circle. Juana also suggested to Laureate that it might be a good idea to keep her distance from Soraya, given that Soraya seemed a bit insensitive. Stepping back a little, Juana told Laureate that she could make her own judgment. Nevertheless, Laureate still thought that Soraya didn't seem like a bad person. Juana added that she mentioned it because she didn't want Laureate to have any trouble with Soraya. Suddenly, a voice called out Laureate's name from behind, and when she turned around, she was taken by surprise. Azrahan, with his incredibly handsome face, approached, saying he had come to pick her up because he missed her so much. Azrahan couldn't care less about their surroundings as he poured his heart out to Laureate. This display naturally left all the ladies completely stunned. Then, Azrahan swiftly shifted back to his usual cool demeanor and greeted Erzi. With a grin, he cheerfully escorted Laureate to the carriage, prompting her to bid farewell to her friends. However, Erzi couldn't help but wonder what had caused Azrahan's sudden change in behavior. Inside the carriage, Laureate asked Azrahan if he planned to head back to the Imperial Palace after picking her up. Azrahan's face clouded over as he confessed he wished they could hang out longer. Laureate tried to ease his worries, saying she had her own stuff to do, so it was bound to happen. Azrahan eventually got it, but he seemed a bit awkward, and his flushed face sort of gave away his desire to hold Laureate's hand. Laureate couldn't help but think he was absolutely cute. Laureate suddenly grabbed Azrahan's face and planted a kiss on his lips. Azrahan attempted to dodge at first, asking her to wait a moment. But then he softly put his arm around Laureate's waist and returned the kiss tenderly. Their kisses grew more passionate and intense, as if they had no intention of pulling away from each other. But when their lips finally parted, Azrahan casually remarked that even though he had no prior plans, it didn't seem like a bad idea inside the carriage. He then softly squeezed Laureate's hand and gave her a loving look. Laureate couldn't quite grasp what Azrahan meant and started to feel puzzled, so she asked him to explain. Instead of answering, Azrahan leaned in for another soft kiss on Laureate's lips and playfully remarked on her boldness, noting that she had initiated the kiss without the intention of finishing it. Azrahan smirked and said that meant Laureate needed a little punishment too. Laureate found herself falling for his handsome face over and over again, making it hard for her to think straight. She even briefly wished she could convince Azrahan to skip the Imperial Palace. Her mind kept urging her to carry on with what they were doing, hinting that the carriage idea wasn't so bad after all. But just as Azrahan leaned in closer to her, the coachman suddenly shouted, announcing their arrival at their destination. Laureate seized the opportunity, quickly jumping out of the carriage with a blush on her face, leaving Azrahan behind. As she dashed away, Azrahan couldn't help but laugh. He called out to Laureate, wearing his seductive smile, and suggested they could continue later at home. Laureate turned back to Azrahan and said that if he kept that up, they should use their own room. In the midst of the city, Laureate spotted Doha, who really stood out from the crowd. She called out to him, captivated by how amazing Doha looked in his casual outfit. Doha explained that he had to change because his uniform got stained earlier. As Laureate examined Doha in his casual attire once more, she couldn't help but admire his good looks. His face was like a fashion statement itself, and it was mind-blowing. Doha brought her back to reality, explaining that he wanted to teach her how to blend in and stay low-key, which was why he suggested meeting there. Laureate was pumped, wondering if being discreet was a crucial skill for self-preservation. She eagerly mentioned that she liked it. But when Doha heard the word "like" from Laureate, out of the blue, he felt something strange inside his heart, like it was racing, and it made his face turn red. But then it dawned on him that Laureate didn't say she had feelings for him, and he couldn't help but wonder what was going on with him. While he was lost in thought, Laureate asked about the first steps. Regaining his composure, Doha explained that her objective was to vanish into the crowd so no one would notice her. He went on to provide a detailed explanation of how to manipulate mana. As Laureate attempted to concentrate on casting a spell, she unexpectedly reached out and grabbed Doha's hand while working her magic. She flashed a smile and asked if that's what Doha meant. This left Doha momentarily speechless. A few hours ago, Doha had been ambushed by a group of assailants. He quickly unleashed his magic to defend himself, and in the end, he managed to defeat all of his attackers. However, his priest's robe was now stained with blood. Knowing that Laureate was someone who wouldn't harm others out of fear of hurting them, he figured his bloodied appearance might frighten her and decided to change into a fresh outfit before meeting her. It was a decision he never thought he'd make for a woman. Doha admitted that ever since he first met Laureate, he'd been experiencing all sorts of new feelings. He questioned whether his interest in her was deepening. Doha used to be someone who detested the idea of falling in love the most. He never thought he'd find himself in this situation. But here he was, unable to deny that he wanted Laureate deeply. Seeing Laureate made him realize just how much he desired her. He wondered if she had any inkling about his true identity. As Doha was the high priest in Altheon and a strong candidate to become the next pope, he pondered whether Laureate would be drawn to his power and status, which equaled that of the emperor. However, he had a hunch that if she ever discovered his past, she might come to loathe him. She could despise him once she learned that he was once a commoner who had lived on the streets. Out of the blue, Doha caught sight of something behind him, breaking his train of thought. It was the assassin sent to eliminate him. He quickly flashed a smile at Laureate, mentioning that there was something he wanted to purchase and requesting her permission to leave. He assured her he'd be back soon. Laureate, still buzzing with excitement, encouraged Doha to go and assured him she could practice on her own. As Doha scanned the area, he realized he didn't need to worry about leaving Laureate alone since she was surrounded by highly skilled knights in their hidden location. So, he left Laureate behind and disappeared into the bustling crowd. He lured the assassin into a dim, cramped alleyway. The assassin attempted to provoke him, but Doha remained unfazed. As the assassin launched an attack on Doha, he contemplated how to neutralize the threat without getting messy. Just as the assassin's knife was about to reach Doha's head, Laureate sprinted to his side and called out his name. Sporting a deeply concerned expression, she unleashed an attack spell on the assassin without hesitation, ultimately ending his life. Doha was completely taken aback, struggling to believe what he had just witnessed. With the assassin's blood splattered on parts of her dress and face, Laureate wore a concerned expression and asked Doha if he was okay. She hurried over to him, gently touching his face and inquiring if he had been hurt anywhere. Doha couldn't help but wonder why Laureate, a noblewoman who had always avoided harming others and even seemed scared to do so, had now taken a life to protect him. Still unable to find his voice, Doha watched as Laureate, trembling, continued to inquire about his well-being. His heart raced, and he softly called her name. It finally dawned on him that the persistent feeling inside him was love. And yes, he was falling in love with Laureate. Trembling, Laureate hugged Doha, trying to assure him that everything was all right. Doha still couldn't believe his own feelings, attempting to convince himself it was just an illusion. Reminding himself that love was a nasty emotion, Doha used his magic to clean their blood-stained clothes, insisting he was perfectly fine. He expressed gratitude to Laureate for rescuing him and suggested she head home soon, promising to continue their lesson next time. As Doha escorted her back to the carriage, he convinced Laureate that the guy earlier was an assassin sent to off him. He stressed that the assassin deserved what he got, and that the most important thing was Laureate saving him. Doha made it clear that was the only thing Laureate needed to keep in mind. With a gentle touch to Doha's face, Laureate thanked him and urged him to be careful. Laureate's gentle touch on Doha's face made his cheeks turn red and his heart raced. It felt like he was on the verge of spilling everything to her. Despite that, Doha held back and told Lauriette to go. As he saw the carriage moving away, Doha thought it was better for Lauriette to leave quickly. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to keep his feelings in check much longer. Returning to Candle's manor, Azrahan was already there, greeting Lauriette with his charming smile. Wanting to avoid making Azrahan anxious, Lauriette tried to respond cheerfully. However, Azrahan noticed something was off and asked if someone had tried to harm her. Lauriette looked concerned, attempting to deny it, saying everything was fine. Quickly shifting back to her cheerful self, she changed the topic. While walking, Azrahan caught a glance from Gerard, who signaled that something was up with Lauriette. Azrahan figured it was okay if she didn't want to spill the beans, but he wasn't about to just sit back and do nothing. Inside the manor, Halstein had already whipped up a cake to celebrate Lauriette's 50 days in the Candle residence. It hit Lauriette that her time was also running out. Worried that her body might give in to the disease she was grappling with, especially in front of Azrahan, she didn't want him to witness her departure in that state. Despite feeling really down, Lauriette tried to hide her true emotions and put on a happy smile for Azrahan. Yet she couldn't shake the thought that she'd have to leave him soon. In her room, Lauriette couldn't catch a wink of sleep. She thought about all the moments with Azrahan, starting from the first time they crossed paths. It reminded her that she had almost lifted all his curses and helped him overcome his trauma. Knowing that her time was running out, and with so much still left on her to-do list, she tried to reassure herself that she could tough it out for a bit longer, and everything would work out in the end. The next day, Lauriette and her friends were having tea when Geneviève brought back souvenirs from her trip to the east. She handed out ribbons, each with a different color chosen by Geneviève. However, Sharia, being a bit cunning, sported a sad look and eyed Lauriette's ribbon, claiming she preferred the pink one. Lauriette, familiar with such situations from her childhood when Rayon used to snatch her stuff, decided to let Sharia swap ribbons. While the other ladies looked displeased and tried to remind Sharia, Lauriette insisted that they'd just exchange and left it at that. Out of nowhere, Sharia threw in a question about Lauriette and Azrahan's relationship. Lauriette couldn't spill about it being a contract thing, so she just shot her a smile. Geneviève and Urs got all hyped up, saying they'd never seen Azrahan smile the way he did at Lauriette. But then Sharia dropped a bomb, asking if there were any marriage plans in the works. Lauriette played it smart, saying she couldn't spill on that one either. All of a sudden, Sharia's expression changed and she muttered as expected. In the training room, Azrahan and Gerard were going at it, and Azrahan was on fire, not giving Gerard a chance to catch his breath. After hearing about Lauriette taking down the assassin to save Doha, Azrahan told Gerard to dig up everything about Doha. Out of the blue, Gerard brought up the meeting Azrahan attended and asked him if he'd be up for going to war. Things got complicated with the neighboring kingdom, and Candle, being the closest dukedom to the Danube kingdom, was being pushed into joining the war. But Azrahan shut that idea down, saying he wasn't going to war. With Lauriette by his side, he had no plans to leave her behind. Mid-conversation, Lauriette's arrival caught their attention. Azrahan shot a signal to Gerard to make a quick exit. Lauriette strolled in with a big smile, greeting Azrahan, who looked all sweaty. Without missing a beat, Lauriette offered to help Azrahan freshen up, throwing in a playful suggestion that they could take a bath together, making Azrahan's face turn as red as a beet. Surprisingly, he agreed and fired back with a tease of his own. It looked like our shy Azrahan was nowhere to be found. In the bathroom, Azrahan, all soaked in the tub, looked disappointed to find out he was the only one taking a dip. Lauriette was there, though, helping him out with the soap. Suddenly, Azrahan decided to make a bold move and grabbed Lauriette's hand, which already had the soap, guiding it down his body. This move turned Lauriette's face tomato red. Azrahan then pulled her in closer and whispered if they should just take a bath together. Lauriette, not budging, said she was only there to help him wash and teased Azrahan to hang on for a bit, even though it was a bit challenging. Instead, she decided to playfully drench him with water from the wash basin, leaving him all wet from head to toe. Seeing this, Lauriette let out a playful laugh. but Azrahan, with a serious look, called out for her to come closer. Since Laureate didn't react, Azrahan hopped out of the tub, all unclothed and soaking wet, causing Laureate to sprint away to dodge him. However, she couldn't escape Azrahan's clutches. As he carried Laureate, he playfully teased her that it was payback time. Laureate was ready to get soaked in the tub, but to her surprise, Azrahan didn't head in that direction. Instead, he took her to the bed, gently placing her down and telling her to see if she could handle him. You can probably guess what went down next. The next morning, Laureate woke up looking all disheveled from the previous night with Azrahan the beast. Halstein let her know that they still couldn't get in touch with Doha, leaving Laureate concerned and starting to worry about him. But then Halstein asked her about her plans for the day, making Laureate think about her bucket list. The only thing she hadn't checked off was number 5, traveling abroad. So Laureate told Halstein she was just going to head to the city. Laureate wandered around the city, getting everything ready for her plan to leave. She felt confident that she could handle herself against thieves, thanks to her magic skills. Little did she know, Jared had already taken care of that matter. Once she gathered all she needed, she spotted Urs in the bustling crowd. As she approached her, she overheard some guys talking trash about Urs. Unable to tolerate it, Laureate invited them to a more secluded spot. With a wave of her magic, Laureate taught them a lesson. Turns out, Urze had been trailing Laureate and witnessed her dealing with those jerks. Flustered by what Laureate did for her, Urze invited Laureate to grab some snacks. Little did they know, Doha and his sidekick were watching them from a distance. Mistaking Laureate for hanging out with another guy, Doha was burning up with jealousy. He felt the urge to throttle Urze right then and there, not wanting anyone to love Laureate but him. Earlier, at the temple, Doha had a meeting with High Priest Gibralfaro, who asked Doha why he wanted to meet. Instead of answering, Doha threw the question back, wondering why Gibralfaro wanted to see him. Lately, Gibralfaro had been showing his displeasure toward Doha, seeing him as a rival. Doha realized that Gibralfaro even sent assassins to take him out. Out of nowhere, Gibralfaro brought up the topic of Doha having a lover on the side. This caught Doha off guard, as he didn't want anyone to know about it, fearing something bad might happen to his precious Laureate. Though Doha remained calm, he warned Gibralfaro not to push him any further. However, Gibralfaro mentioned Doha's mother, pushing Doha to the point where he couldn't hold back his anger any longer. Doha was hit with a blast from the past, remembering his childhood nightmare when his mother used to tell him she loved him and couldn't live without him. He was on the edge of attacking Gibralfaro, when, just in the nick of time, Doha's subordinates stepped in to stop them from throwing down. Gibralfaro left, leaving Doha still raging. Suddenly, Doha's subordinate informed him that Kendall had called the temple, indicating that Laureate was searching for him. He also let Doha know that he did as Doha requested, telling them they had no clue where he was. Doha felt a twinge of guilt as he came to terms with his feelings for Laureate. He didn't want Gibralfaro to have even the slightest inkling about it. Doha was dead set on avoiding anything that might harm Laureate, which is why he was determined not to mess up in any way. He then instructed his subordinate to get the carriage ready as he intended to head out. But now, what he witnessed before him hit Doha hard. Laureate was enjoying herself with another guy. Jealousy stabbed at Doha's heart, prompting him to tell his subordinate to give a heads-up to Kendall that he planned to drop by the next day. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Urze and Laureate were having lunch when Urze brought up a rumor about Rayon having a terminal illness. The grapevine suggested that Rayon's face was messed up, keeping him confined to his home. Some tales even hinted at an accident. Urze spilled that others speculated it was linked to Mana disease. She mentioned that Duke and Duchess Blanche were all torn up about it. When Urze dropped the name Locadura, the same disease Laureate had dealt with, it shook Laureate to her core. She started to wonder if it was a genetic thing. Suddenly feeling queasy, Laureate got upset, thinking about how she and her brother faced the same illness, yet their parents treated them differently, and that just pissed her off. Seeing Laureate's pale face, Urze got worried and asked if she was alright. Laureate assured her that she was okay. She thought about not wanting anyone to know about her illness and figured the best move was to go far away on her own. The next day at the Candle Manor, Doha finally dropped by to treat Lauriette, who looked concerned and asked if he had caught the person behind the assassin. Doha avoided eye contact and assured her that everything was under control, so she didn't need to worry anymore. Lauriette, with a big smile, told Doha to keep her in the loop because she was concerned about him. Cutting her off mid-sentence, Doha asked about their relationship. Without missing a beat, Lauriette casually stated they were just friends. Doha realized he had blurted out the question without thinking earlier. Doha gently touched Lauriette's hand while performing the healing procedure. He noticed his heart racing like crazy at the touch, wondering if Lauriette would bolt if she knew how he felt. Out of the blue, Halstein startled Doha from behind, delivering a letter for Lauriette. It seemed Halstein sensed something off with Doha, giving him suspicious stares. As Lauriette read the letter aloud from Urs, Doha's ears perked up. Erze mentioned Lauriette as a soulmate, making Doha ponder if Urs was the guy he saw her with in the city. Jealousy burned inside Doha. Doha couldn't help but let his jealousy show in front of Lauriette, asking her to focus only on him when they were together. His actions made Lauriette wonder if Doha felt neglected. Suddenly realizing he was acting out of line, Doha apologized for being too much. However, Lauriette reassured him that she understood his feelings, especially since she kept talking about her other friend. Somehow, Lauriette picked up on something strange in Doha's expression. She quickly shifted back to her cheerful self and invited Doha to start their lesson. While teaching Lauriette magic, Doha noticed one of Azrahan's knights sneaking off somewhere. Doha wondered what he was up to, but as long as he didn't pose a threat to Lauriette, he didn't care. In the Empire Palace, the high-ranking nobles were debating whether to go to war or not. But Azrahan had no desire to return to the battlefield and risk his life again. As he strolled around the palace, Azrahan pondered his simple desire to live happily with the one he loved. He couldn't wrap his head around why everyone was so concerned and unwilling to let him live in peace. Out of the blue, Sharia tapped Azrahan on the back from behind and greeted him cheerfully, using his name. Hearing someone other than Lauriette calling him by his name, Azrahan didn't seem too pleased. He quickly retorted that she didn't have permission to address him that way. Panicked, Sharia apologized, explaining she was just following Lauriette's lead. She then asked Azrahan to call her by her name, Sharia. In that moment, Azrahan couldn't help but wonder if he could find a way to get rid of Sharia. Despite being Lauriette's friend, he found her chatter annoying. Sharia mentioned being Lauriette's best friend and how they often met up. She then brought up her belief that it wasn't a good idea to judge people solely based on their status. Hearing this, Azrahan couldn't help but wonder if Sharia was hinting at a relationship between a nobleman and a lady of lower rank. He knew Lauriette didn't think that way. As he thought about Lauriette, he felt a sudden blush and found himself missing her. Seeing Azrahan's expression, Sharia got ahead of herself, thinking that Azrahan was into her. She believed that some nobles were just nice to those of lower rank, and she prided herself on being kind to Lauriette, whom she viewed as a poor commoner. Out of the blue, Sharia invited Azrahan to grab a bite together sometime to get to know each other better. Returning to his usual cold demeanor, Azrahan responded with a casual sure if Lauriette wants to. He then swiftly made his exit from Sharia, his mind filled with thoughts of Lauriette, wishing he could kiss her 100 times over. Meanwhile, Sharia wore a sly smile, pondering if she could get Azrahan to break up with Lauriette and choose her instead. In your dreams, lady. Back at Candle's Manor, Lauriette's magic skills were improving rapidly. Now she could flawlessly use invisible magic. She was thrilled, pondering if she might be the best at it. However, when she entered her room, she found a man already inside, using his invisible skills. He looked surprised as Lauriette noticed him and questioned what he was doing there. Panicking, the man introduced himself as one of Candle's knights, but Lauriette didn't buy it. He then explained that since he was new there, he had gotten lost. However, Lauriette couldn't believe it, asking why he had used the invisible magic. The man struggled to come up with an excuse and quickly asked for permission to leave before darting out of there. Sensing something fishy, Laureate informed Halstein about the suspicious man. Halstein was taken aback upon hearing this. Later that night, Azrahan dashed over to Laureate, looking worried. He hugged her, realizing how reckless he had been to let an intruder into Candle's manor. Recognizing that he had many enemies, he had almost forgotten about Laureate's safety. Azrahan apologized to Laureate, feeling guilty and regretful for his recklessness. Laureate reassured him that she was fine and nothing had happened. Then, out of the blue, she kissed Azrahan, telling him not to worry anymore. After Laureate left, Azrahan turned to Melissa and Gerard, who were hiding nearby. With a sharp glare in his eyes, Azrahan demanded an explanation from them. Gerard explained that the intruder had vanished after being caught by Laureate, and he had no clue about the intruder's intentions in Candle's manor. Azrahan then instructed them to find out, and he gave them a week to apprehend the intruder and bring them to him. After that incident, the atmosphere in the manor became tense, with Azrahan even pleading with Laureate not to go anywhere. On a sunny day later, during a gathering with Laureate's friends, Sharia boldly asked to sit next to Azrahan. The other ladies tried to dissuade Sharia, but she persisted, insisting that her request wasn't a big deal. Laureate calmly responded, saying it wasn't too much. But she simply didn't want to accommodate Sharia's request. Upon hearing Laureate's rejection, Sharia became annoyed and demanded to know why Laureate responded that way. Laureate put on a smile and said it was because Azrahan was so shy. Sharia couldn't hide her annoyance, feeling insulted that Laureate, whom she viewed as a lowly commoner, dared to reject her. In Sharia's mind, Laureate was only there because Urzi pitied her, and she believed it was a waste for someone as perfect as Azrahan to be with a lowly commoner like Laureate. She even tried to signal Urzi to help her, but Laureate could easily read what was on Sharia's mind. Not wanting to cause a scene, Laureate asked for permission to leave first, saying she wasn't feeling well. Seeing Laureate leave the meeting, Urzi quickly dashed after her. Sharia, with a sly smile, suggested that must be chasing after Laureate to scold her. Wana couldn't believe her ears, speechless at Sharia's assumption. Urzi called out to Laureate, who looked surprised to see her rushing over. Without wasting any time, apologized to Laureate, saying she couldn't stop Sharia from hurting her. Hearing this, Laureate told her not to blame herself, as it wasn't her fault. Urzi reassured her that she would personally talk to Sharia about the incident, expressing her sadness at seeing her own best friend hurt. Urzi hoped that Laureate would feel comfortable opening up to her about her feelings. Those words eased Laureate's mind, and she thanked Urza as she embraced her. Doha, who was already present, used his stealth magic to watch them with jealousy, still convinced that Urzi was a man. He wondered if Laureate would be as happy to see him as she was to see Urzi and Azrahan. As Urzi passed by Doha, he realized something that surprised him. Suddenly, Laureate asked Doha why he had arrived early. Doha was taken aback, asking how Laureate knew he was there since he was using stealth magic. Laureate answered with a proud smile, and Doha realized that wasn't a man but the crown princess. Laureate then invited Doha to study at a dessert shop she had just learned about from a friend. Accepting Laureate's invitation, Doha's feelings for her grew even deeper. He couldn't deny his feelings anymore, no matter how hard he tried. He truly wanted Laureate to be by his side. Laureate was in Azrahan's room to perform the final purification treatment. Azrahan couldn't believe that the curse could finally be lifted. Laureate assured him that all he needed to do now was to be happy. Feeling relieved and overjoyed, Azrahan grabbed Laureate's face and surprised her with a kiss on the lips. He didn't plan to release her lips, pulling her onto his bed. He didn't even let her catch her breath until he noticed Laureate was almost fainting from lack of air. Suddenly, Laureate asked Azrahan if, after the purification was complete, they could go somewhere together. Maybe to the sea or anywhere, as long as she was with him. Azrahan, who had never considered it before, felt incredibly happy at the idea of traveling with Laureate for the first time. He eagerly expressed his excitement and said he couldn't wait. Laureate was thrilled with Azrahan's response and suggested they go before summer. Azrahan replied with a confident sure and planted a kiss on her cheek. Meanwhile, Gerard was on the verge of giving up as he couldn't find the intruder, fearing Azrahan's punishment. Finally, Melissa made a breakthrough. She discovered some documents that the intruder had touched, and through magic, she revealed that the intruder had made copies of them. These documents contained information about trade data with the Danube Kingdom, the very kingdom they were on the brink of war with. It seemed Duke Ellington was behind it, trying to manipulate Azrahan into joining the war. Azrahan also noticed traces of Blanche magic on the documents, which upset him. He asked Melissa about the implications of the discovery. Melissa predicted that Duke Ellington would use the documents to accuse Candle of treason, insisting that Azrahan join the war to prove Candle's innocence. Azrahan grew even more worried, his mind consumed with concerns for Laureate. He wondered if he could rectify the situation and if Laureate would wait for him. He then instructed Gerard and Melissa to prepare all the necessary rebuttal documents. During her magic lesson, Doha suddenly brought up Laureate's plan to travel alone, leaving her wondering if she had mentioned it to him before. As they took a break, Doha asked why she wanted to go alone, or if it was too difficult to share. He speculated whether Laureate planned to travel solo after breaking up with Azrahan. To his surprise, Laureate nodded in agreement, indicating he was correct. Laureate then opened up to Doha about her 3-month contract relationship with Azrahan. Doha was surprised by this revelation, and Laureate shared that she was the one who proposed the arrangement. Understanding Azrahan's character, Doha realized that he probably wouldn't be satisfied with just a contract, especially considering how Laureate had helped him find purpose and lifted his curse. Laureate emphasized the need for secrecy to avoid rumors. As Doha agreed, he couldn't help but wonder if he would ever be able to express his true feelings to Laureate. In the Blanche residence, Duke Blanche was in conversation with someone, discussing Laureate's association with Azrahan. The individual he was speaking with turned out to be the intruder apprehended by Laureate at Candle's Manor. Duke Blanche expressed his adamant refusal to allow Laureate to be with Azrahan. He acknowledged Laureate as the strongest descendant of the Blanche family, and admitted to purposely mistreating her to instill cowardice. Blaming Laureate for Rayon's situation, Duke Blanche harbored intense hatred towards her. He ordered the man to eliminate Laureate before she could further disrupt their plans.